My mom takes my iPad and refuses to give it back. Now I know how this sounds, but just wait, I'll go into depth of how this happened and why it happened as soon as I tell you some backstory. I was around the age of 13 when this happened and got my phone taken for escaping into the world of mobile games when my mother and grandmother would start fights on the daily. I do actually remember one day humming to the tune of the second level of Geometry Dash while tears streamed down my face and headphones on with the muffled voices of the argument in the background hiding between my deceased grandfather's piano and the couch. One day I found a game called Blockheads. I was fascinated with it, and it had a multiplayer mode with the ability to either text or speak to them through microphones. I wanted to try it, so I made a little block house with a welcome sign and put it on multiplayer. Someone joined and we got to talking. I know the dangers of the internet now more than ever, but this kid had never said anything wrong to me or creepy. We just had a chat about the game and an overall usual conversation. My classmates at school told me the kid I was playing blockheads with was one of the kids on the middle school football team, though I never met him as I was mostly mute and hardly ushered a word from my home life. He was extremely kind behind the screen where I felt most comfortable to talk. I come home and have my iPad taken from me, and I get yelled at saying you need to stop talking to strangers on the internet. I of course get upset, but this was not a thing I didn't get punished for the first time. I got punished for it several times because though I did get bullied online, I made several friends. Some I know to this day as making friends in person was extremely difficult for me, and my home life was nothing but spankings and yelling day in day out. I had to escape too, somewhere to find happiness just to keep protecting my brother, otherwise I would have lost grip of life. Because of my mother I had depression and even attempted suicide at the young age of 6. No kid should be scared of their mom, and I was. But back to the story. My mom promised me the iPad back in 6 months. No biggie, I've had phones taken for a year and turned into a brick before, this is fine. But 6 months turned into 3 years, and when I go to my mother about it she tells me it's her iPad now. I'm devastated because the iPad was a Christmas gift bought by my grandmother, but I was no stranger to having my stuff claimed by her by now. So I let it go. 3 years turned into 7 years, and now I am newly 22 years old, and she doesn't know where my iPad is and refuses to pay for it, yet gives my 2-year-old an iPad of her own. Am I wrong to hold a grudge? It's not like I spoke to any of the people intimately, cause at the time I didn't even know what that was until I turned 14 and my little brother, 2-year difference, showed me some videos back when we trusted each other with our lives and shared everything with one another. I just feel like if my grandmother died today, that money she used to buy the iPad for me would have ended up never being mine. My mother refuses to replace or pay my grandma back when I know the money would help her right now. To this day most of my friends are online because my mother is controlling, and even though I'm an adult I'm not in her eyes. Tifu by getting a new phone. A few small bits of info before I get to the foo. 1. Due to our landlord selling our property, my wife and I are currently living with my mother, and so far it's been going well. 2. It's my son's 11th birthday next month, and we're finally caving and getting him a phone. 3. We figured as it's his first phone it would be better to give him my old phone and I'd upgrade mine. 4. I went from a Samsung S22 to 23 Ultra. Now to the foo. My phone arrived and I've been busy setting it up, while most of my files and everything copied across to the new phone. The photos in my secure album didn't, and I've been forced to move these manually. The photos in the secure album are, shall we say, intimate photos of my wife. When moving the photos they were saving directly into my gallery, and I then had to manually save them into a secure album. My wife and I were sat on our sofa in the room which my mother has kindly converted into our living room. While I was transferring the photos across, my mom happened to come into the room and was just chatting with us. She noticed I was playing with my new phone and asked if I liked it and if she could see it honestly. She's more excited about seeing this phone than me. I said of course and handed her the phone, not expecting her to go browsing through my gallery. There she is, sat on our coffee table, facing my wife and I, flicking through my new phone, when suddenly, oh, is that someone's bum? She had loaded up my gallery and was immediately shown a picture of my gorgeous wife, naked, gagged, blindfolded, legs stacked in a spreader, and tied facing the door. My mother quickly hands the phone to my wife. Is that yours? As my wife sees the picture, she goes bright red and begins to laugh nervously, as do my mother and I. While open-minded and fairly liberal, I never intended to reveal to my mother that my wife and I were into some light bondage. My mom was quick to apologize. She thought the gallery was unlikely to be private and laughed that they're both women, so it's fine. My poor wife has never been so embarrassed, and me, I have a feeling that I will never get to live this down. TLDR, by getting a new phone and revealing my wife's ass to my mother. My mother makes my brother and I sneak into a concert, making me super confused and scared. My mother is dating a married man who isn't married to her, and he sometimes volunteers to a rodeo that also does concerts. I won't say where for anyone in the state of Texas already should know where I'm talking about, and it's best to keep it that way to keep an arm bomb off me while I still live with this woman. I forget how old I was, but I know I was in high school. So around for 6 years ago. She did this every now and then when the tickets were too expensive or sold out. My mother's boyfriend would give the three of us volunteer NAMA tags, and when this first happened I was confused, wondering why we didn't have tickets. It wasn't till we were being coerced into the back way in that I realized she was making us pretend to be volunteer workers. I was scared to get caught. My mother told me to calm down, it's going to be okay. I knew it was wrong, but I put on the same face I do at school. This is completely normal face. When it get yelled at by my mother in school over stupid shit. Though we did get, and I still feel guilty to this day that she cheated the system like this alongside him. The man would also give her extra drinking tickets, so she would get to drink more than normal then drive us home. At the time I didn't think much of it except her distracted driving, and for those wondering, I will tell the man's wife the moment I leave that her husband is cheating on her. Hospital nurse thought my parents were crazy, possibly more crazy than entitled, but a happy story nonetheless. As a child I was hospitalized numerous times for asthma. More often than not I would end up on the kids ward on the top floor of the hospital after a brief stay in the A&E. And more often than not it would be in the same 6 or 8 hospital bedded room that looked out over the town we lived in. But one day when I was 4 or 5, going back to the early 1980s, my attack was so bad I ended up on the respiratory ward in a different part of the hospital. So no view, no familiar nurses, and no toys since I was stuck in a big plastic tent-like structure that covered the whole bed and helped me breathe properly. I wasn't allowed out. I had to stay there for 2 weeks. I was bored senseless. My parents were only allowed to visit for an hour a day, and whilst I was used to being in hospital, not having anyone to talk was driving me a little insane, until a rather nice astronaut man in a rocket ship took it upon himself to talk to me and read me stories. He disappeared for 3 or 4 hours every day, usually around the time my parents visited, and so I told them about this fantastical in their eyes man, so they went to the senior ward nurse and kicked up a huge fuss repeating my story. The ward sister or nurse in charge couldn't make sense of the story and thought my parents were a little crazy and told them so. It was only on the last day on that ward before I was being moved up to the kids ward and freedom that they met the astronaut man. His name was Mike. He had polio in one of the many outbreaks in the UK in the 1950s before the vaccine was compulsory, and spent part of his time in an iron lung, his rocket ship. The time he wasn't on the ward was when he went to have physiotherapy, a bath, and got some fresh air in the garden by the other ward. It made him laugh till he was red as my folks told him what I had said. They ended up apologizing to the senior ward nurse for calling her crazy. She thought they were crazy, when really it was just me not knowing about stuff, and just describing things the way Mike told me. Dad ruins my high school graduation by getting drunk on my mom's tab. I'm not entirely sure this fits perfectly here, but I wanted to share it. My dad has a bad drinking problem, like makes him pretty much incapable of functioning. He has, I think, around a grand total of 14 duas. He and my mom got divorced when I was 5. He was upset a lot through ages 9-13, and we've had a lot of issues over the years. One thing he always brags about is that he's been to all of my graduations. That's technically true, but he's ruined most of them. My high school graduation, we went to eat at the Mexican restaurant after. My dad was unemployed. He's later managed to get disability, but he didn't have it at the time and living out of a garage. My mom offered to pay for his food, since he couldn't. The meal was fine at first, we were having a good time. Then my dad ordered the first jumbo margarita. When he ordered the second, my mom flew off the handle and basically had to run outside the building to avoid strangling my father over the tortilla chips. My brother and his at the time girlfriend ran out after my mom to help calm her down. I was left at the table with my dad and my mom's on or off boyfriend. Mom's BF is a shit stirrer, so this was a problem. When the waitress came over, my dad tried to order a third margarita. The waitress told him it wasn't a good idea and asked if my mom was okay with that. Mom's BF was laughing and asked my dad, "You going to let her tell you what to do? You're entitled to a drink." My dad literally started berating this poor woman and told her I'm a grown-ass man and I can have another drink if I want one. My ass was basically losing it at this point and was telling him not be an asshole and that he was making a scene. To which I got told, "I'm your father. You can't talk to me that way. Double quotes. By the time mom came in, they immediately started going at it. We basically had to just pay the check and leave. My dad obviously can't drive, so we also had to drive him home. He basically just called my mom swears as we drove away. If you asked him though, absolutely none of that happened and he was a perfect, supportive dad during the graduation.